Shebi they say that what God cannot do does not exist. They say what you cannot solve does not exist. Why is my case different? I put it to you today, God, that what you cannot solve exists, oh, and that is me and my problem.
Early one morning, in a small dusty village, the sun rises slowly, casting an orange glow over the mud brick houses. A young boy named Daniel, around 10 years old, sits on the ground, tying his worn out shoes with frayed laces. His mother sat beside him, stroking his head. Daniel, remember, God will make a way. Daniel responded in a small voice. But when, Mama? I'm tired of being hungry. His mother, smiling through her own sadness, said, Hold on to faith, my son, even when it hurts. Faith was all they had. Faith and the will to survive. One day, on the same dusty path leading to the village school, Daniel walked barefoot, carrying his only notebook, its pages thin and crumpled. Other children ran past him, some with packed lunches, others wearing sturdy shoes. He looked down at his feet, swallowing hard. Mama, he said softly, why can't I have shoes like them? His mother responded, squeezing his hand, because God is teaching us to be strong. One day, you will stand tall, my son, and you will remember these days with gratitude. Hunger knocked at him, but so did the hope his mother carried in her eyes. Inside a small classroom with wooden benches, Daniel sat at the back, staring at the blackboard. His stomach growled, and he gripped it tightly. The teacher called for students to take out their textbooks. Daniel hesitated. His family couldn't afford one. He glanced at his neighbor's book, trying to follow along. The teacher, noticing Daniel, said, Daniel, where is your textbook? Daniel lowered his head and said, I, I, I forgot it at home. Snickered came from the other students. Daniel clenched his feet, but said nothing. His mother's words echoed in his mind. Hold on to faith. In a dimly lit hut, the wind howled outside, slipping through the cracks in the walls. Daniel's mother knelt beside a small wooden bed, her hands clasped in prayers. Daniel watched from the corner, tears in his eyes. His mother, whispering, said, Lord, I don't know how we will eat tomorrow, but I trust you. You are our provider. Daniel wiped his eyes and said, Mama, does God really hear us? His mother turned to him and said, Every single word, my son, even the ones we don't say out loud. She pulled him close, and though his stomach still ached, a small warmth spread in his heart. He fell asleep to the sound of her quiet prayers. Years later, Daniel got admitted into the university. One day, a small faded envelope sat on a rickety wooden table. Daniel, now older, stared at it, his hands trembling. His mother watched him, holding her breath. Daniel, in a voice shaking, said, I got in, Mama! I got in! The university accepted me! His mother, tears streaming down her face, said, Praise be to God! I told you, Daniel, He makes a way. The struggles were not over, but this was the beginning of God's promise unfolding. While in the university, Daniel was a serious student. He knew what it cost his mother to put him in the university. Having lost his father as a child, he knew what it meant to struggle through life. One day he sat in the university library with a stack of borrowed books. Ada, a bright, beautiful student, noticed him and came over. Ada said in a cheerful voice, "You've been here all day." Daniel was startled and he looked up and said, "Oh, I usually lose track of time when I'm here." Ada, smiling, said, "Oh, you're just really determined." Daniel said softly, "Determination is all I have." Ada reached for his hand and said, "Maybe you have more than you think." There began a beautiful love story. Ada and Daniel began their love journey. Their love blossomed all through university, and even during NYSC, they were posted to the same state, and so they decided to start their life together. They got married and decided to have a happily ever after. However, things aren't always as we plan them. In a tiny one-room apartment, Ada cooked noodles on a small gas stove. Daniel counted coins on the bed. "It's not enough for rent," he said in a worried voice. Ada held his hand and said, "We'll manage. God will make a way." Daniel whispered, "I hope so." Daniel began to search for a good job. It was not an easy task. With his good degree, he had assumed that he would get a good job as soon as he finished NYC. But everywhere he turned to, he got rejection letters. But after a few years, he got a promising job and he came home excited. Daniel was beaming and shouted, "Ada, I finally got hired." Ada was so happy she jumped on him. "God is good. God is great." And Daniel worked hard. He was diligent, he was dedicated, and he was loyal. He played his part, and the company rewarded him. However, life happened. Government policy happened. The company began to struggle because of a new government policy that the management had thought would never see the light of day. Unfortunately, the policy was implemented and it affected the company adversely. The company began to lose money, millions of naira every week, and investors pulled out. There was one solution: downsizing. Unfortunately, Daniel was let go. His boss called him to the office and said, "Daniel, you know this is not personal." Daniel, in a shaking voice, said, "But I have a family. I have a boy and a girl and a wife to feed." His boss said, "I wish we could do more." Daniel returned home defeated. He got home and told Ada in a dejected voice, "I failed again." Ada held his hand and told him, "No, Daniel, you didn't fail. Life is just hard." Daniel looked at his two children, David and Namara, and said, "God, how will I take care of these children?" A few months after Daniel didn't get another job, he decided to venture into business. He thought of owning a grocery store. One night, as he sat together with Ada at the kitchen table, he told Ada, "I just need a small amount to start. The location is perfect and I can get supplies on credit." Ada bit her lip and looked thoughtfully. "We barely have enough for rent, Daniel. Where will we get the money?" Daniel said, "I don't know, but I can't keep doing odd jobs forever. This store could change everything." Ada said softly, "Okay, let me talk to my boss." Daniel paused. "Your boss?" No, Ada, I can't let you. Ada said firmly, interrupting him. We're a team, Daniel. Please let me try. Let me do this for us. The next day, Ada went to her office and went to see her boss. She told the boss about the loan she needed for her husband's business. Sir, I know it's a lot to ask, but my husband, he just needs a chance. And his boss said, Ada, you've been a loyal employee. I can lend you the money, but it will come from your next 3 salaries. Ada smiled weakly. Thank you, sir. It was actually more than what she had hoped for. Weeks later, the grocery store opened, and Daniel had customers. Business seemed to be booming. A customer even said, your vegetables are the freshest around. Daniel, in a happy voice, said, thank you so much. One night, Daniel and Ada sat at the shop floor, counting money. Daniel was ecstatic. He said, we made enough to restock and buy David a new pair of shoes. Ada, teary-eyed, said, God is good. Daniel nodded and said, yes, he is. Months later, while they were at home, a neighbor banged on their door in the middle of the night. Fire! Fire! Your store is on fire! Wake up, come out! Your store is on fire! Ada and Daniel could not believe what they were hearing. They quickly got up, dressed, and rushed to the store. When they got there, they saw how flames had engulfed the small shop. Daniel fell to his knees, sobbing bitterly. Not again. Not again. Then, after a few weeks, Daniel felt like he could not just sit down at home doing nothing. He thought of going into the poultry business, and he went to the church. At the church courtyard, he spoke with the pastor and cooperative society members. The pastor told him, Daniel, you've been faithful to this community. The cooperative can loan you some money. And the church member immediately answered, but you need to pay it back in installments. Daniel, in a hopeful voice, said, I will. Thank you. Thank you so much. Weeks later, Daniel and Ada walked through their small poultry farm, smiling as chicks pecked around. Ada said, look at them, they're growing so fast. And Daniel, in a proud voice, said, in a few months, we'll sell them and clear half the loan. Unfortunately, life had other plans. One morning, Daniel opened the coop to find several birds dead. Daniel, in a shaking voice, said, no, please God, no. Days passed and more birds died, despite Daniel's desperate efforts. The veterinarian said, it's an outbreak. I'm sorry, you will need to call the flock. Daniel, in a voice breaking, said, but this is everything we have. Daniel, in a devastated way, buried the last of the birds after a few days. He was as devastated as anyone could be after losing everything he had. He began to scream into the sky. Why? Why, God? Why are all these negative things happening to me? I have served you all my life. What is this? Why do I keep failing? Why can I not get anything right? Ada held on to him, tears streaming down her face, said, softly, please, maybe we need to just let go. Daniel whispered, I don't know how. But not all was going badly in Daniel's life. His children, like his wife, were truly a blessing. They excelled in academics and extracurricular activities. They were resilient. They were understanding. Their daughter, Amara, comes home from school with a report card filled with A's. Look, Daddy, I came first in my class, she said excitedly. Daniel smiled weakly and said, "That's amazing, sweetheart." Meanwhile, their son David excelled in soccer as well. He dreamt of playing professionally. He came back home too and said, "Dad, I scored the winning goal." Daniel, in a distant voice, said, "That's great, son." Daniel saw their successes, but the weight of his failures made the victories seem small. Everything seemed to be working against him. And then one day, their daughter Amara came back from school and said, "Daddy, Mommy, my teacher said there's a math competition and the grand prize is $10,000. Daniel smiled weakly. "That's wonderful, my dear." Ada said, "But Amara, you know we can't afford the registration fee or travel expenses." Amara excitedly said, "My teacher already entered me. The organizers are covering the cost." Daniel, in it with teary eyes, said, Maybe this is a sign." Ada made sacrifices for her family. She loved Daniel and her children so much, and she believed that things would work out well for them someday. She worked 2 jobs, one as a teacher and another cleaning offices at night. Most of the time, when she came back home from work, she massaged her aching feet while Daniel prayed. One day, as she was massaging her aching feet, Ada said softly, "God, please give Daniel strength." A friend said, "Ada, you can't keep doing this. Doing 2 jobs. Or even more than that when you have to clean more than one office in the night. You collapse someday." But Ada, in a firm voice, said, "I can't stop. My family needs me." She was such a faithful and loyal wife and mother. Then life happened once again. David became ill. He was seriously ill and they had treated him for all sorts. He wasn't getting any better. Then the doctor announced one day after a series of tests that the solution was a complicated surgery. The doctor said he needs surgery and the cost is high. He should be flown abroad to a specialist hospital for the surgery if we want him to survive and make full recovery. At this point, David immediately entered into depression. He looked around him and saw nothing good. He looked up and shouted, "I thought they said what God cannot do, what God cannot solve, or what God cannot fix does not exist. Well, God, at this point, I doubt if you even exist. And even if you do, there is one thing you cannot solve. That is me and all my problems." He ran out of the hospital shouting, "I will find the money. Without God, my son will not die." He ran to a bar not too far from their home and used the little money he had left on him to buy beer, and he drank himself to stupor. For the first time in his life, Daniel went home drunk. Meanwhile, Ada ran to the church to tell the pastor what was going on. The pastor put call through to some members and they began to donate money. Within 2 hours, they had gathered enough to pay the hospital to keep David in the hospital while waiting for enough money to fly him out. The church also began to pray for help and healing. Then, as Ada was leaving the church, her phone rang. It was the doctor. Fear gripped Ada. This can only be bad news, she thought. But then she said again, "No, God no go shame me." She picked the call and the doctor spoke excitedly. Madam, a miracle has occurred." The hospital abroad has decided to send two specialist surgeons to Nigeria to perform the surgery on David at no cost. They will be here in 2 days. Ada was shocked. She couldn't believe her ears. "It's a lie," she shouted. "It is true," the doctor said in a calm voice. "I am as surprised as you are, madam. But this is happening. Your prayers have been answered. They will arrive in 2 days." Ada went back home joyful, hopeful. She saw David sleeping his drunkenness away. She was sad a bit, but then she was hopeful again. She decided to wait for him to wake up. When he did, he began to sob bitterly, calling himself a failure. And just as he was about to blame God again, his wife told him how the church members had helped and now they were still praying for them. And also the miracle of the surgery. Daniel could not believe his ears. God had truly done this. He was ashamed and he knelt down where he was and asked God for forgiveness. He said, "God, if you could do this in a matter of hours, then I know you can finish what you started." He got up, singing and thanking God. Meanwhile, the surgery and Amara's math competition were scheduled for the same day. At the hospital, while David was being wheeled into surgery, Daniel and Ada sat outside, holding hands tightly. Amara also started the math competition. She competed on an international stage, solving complex problems on a whiteboard while the whole world watched live. She finished and waited for others to finish as well. 100 students were writing the exam at the same time in different parts of the world. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Amara and the other students who qualified for the exam from her school were in the school hall where teachers and students had waited for the result announcement. Everyone was watching online, waiting for the announcement to be made. Amara's heart pounded with anxiety, but she prayed and said, "God, my trust is in you. Your favor surrounds me as a shield. I have manifested excellence by your spirit in this exam, and I will see the result." Suddenly she heard, "And the winner is Amara Okafor from Nigeria." Crowd erupted in applause. Amara, crying, began to say, "I did it. I did it for my family. I thank God. God has helped me, for my family and for my school." And that is how Amara won $10,000 for herself and scholarship to the university level, and the school also won $5,000. At the hospital room, David's breathing became shallow. Machines beeped urgently. Daniel, sobbing, began to say, "Don't take him, God, please. Please, God, don't take him." Ada too was weeping. She was saying, "Don't give up, Daniel. We need you. Daniel, please stay strong." Then Daniel decided to step outside so as not to break down completely in the presence of his wife. As he sat outside in the hospital corridor, he sat with his head in his hands. A stranger approached him and said, "Why do you cry?" Daniel responded dejectedly, "Because hope is a lie." The stranger smiled and said, "Or maybe hope is just hidden." Then, while Ada was waiting in the hospital room, her phone rang. It was Amara's voice as it burst through the speaker. "Mom, Dad, I won $10,000.
Amara took the phone and ran to where Daniel was seated in the corridor. Amara's voice was still shouting, I won $10,000. I won $10,000 and they are giving me a scholarship onto university."
Ada collapsed into Daniel's arms, and they heard the senior sponsor representative say, if Amara prefers to study in Nigeria, we'll convert the scholarship value to Naira to support her education. Ada, crying, just kept saying, thank you so much. And they said, thank you, Jesus. As they were rejoicing over the news, the doctor walked up to them. The surgery was successful. David will live and will make full recovery. Daniel and Ada both collapsed on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. But this time, there were tears of joy. It was the beginning of their breakthrough. Things went from good to best for them. It was a miracle that only God could have done. The money Amara got transformed their lives in an unbelievable way. Months later, the family stood at the grand opening of a new, larger grocery store. Customers filled the aisles. A neighbor said, Daniel, you're back in business? Daniel smiled. Not just back, we're growing. The store flourished, expanding into branches nationwide. Daniel and Ada ran the business side by side. David's recovery was full. He never had any relapse, and he went back to playing football for his school. After David scored the winning goal in a state championship, his coach came to him. Daniel, you've got talent. Have you ever thought of going pro? David smiled and said, I want to study business administration. I want to help my parents in the family business. One day, at a family dinner, laughter filled the air in the Okafor residence. Amara talked about her school, and David shared business ideas. Daniel looked around the table and said, we made it. Ada smiled and said, no, God made it. Teary-eyed, Daniel said, and he never left us, did he? Amara said, never. They bowed their heads in prayer, hands clasped tightly, as their story of pain transformed into a testimony of redemption. On Sunday, Daniel stood at the pulpit, tears streaming down his face. He said, there was a time I said, what God cannot do exists. What God cannot fix exists. What God cannot solve exists. Now I know better. And today I tell everyone listening to me, what God cannot solve does not exist. He looked at Ada and their healthy children in the front row. We stand here as proof. And so, the boy who once borrowed pencils became the man who lent hope. For in the depths of despair, he found a God who never stopped writing his story. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story as much as I enjoyed writing it. I'd love to hear from you. Please tell me in the comments, have you ever been in a situation where you doubted the existence or even the power of God? Or do you know anyone that has once been in that situation? Let me know. Or perhaps you know anyone that is currently in that situation where he doubts that what God cannot solve does not exist. Let me know in the comment section. And like I said in my previous videos, if you have story suggestions, please put them as well in the comment section. Thank you and see you in the next video. Hello friends, it's your personal person, Cha. Thank you for watching and for being a part of this family. Please like and subscribe for more wisdom tales. See you in the next video.